This is part 3 of chapter 8. Now we are going to talk about the behavioral function of investment or investment function. So we already explained the consumption function. If you remember that the major variables we want to explain is the consumption here and investment, and saving also. Saving and consumption was explained together, and the only thing is left is investment, and then we will discuss how the equilibrium will be calculated. And make no mistake that our focus is in goods and services market, so we are assuming that many other variables have already been decided because it's ceteris paribus. So now we would explain the investment function. Investment function, or I. So I is a function of what variables? So if you remember that in investment is the money which is borrowed by the firms. Firms goes to money market, okay, money market, and household are saving. So here the interest rate is going to be a key determinant, because if interest rate goes up, household will be encouraged to put more saving, and these are going to be discouraged to borrow lesser amount. But if it goes down, they are going to borrow more, and they're going to be discouraged to save, and they decrease their savings. So the magnitude of in the equilibrium, of course, the investment and saving are going to be equal in the equilibrium level, but in the absence of that, interest rate actually is bringing this to demand. So this is the supply of money, supply of credit, and this is the demand for the credit. These are the borrowers. So they pay the interest rate because cost of borrowing. This can be cost of borrowing, or reward of lending, or reward for lending. And the householders are basically lenders. So savers or lenders, borrowers or investors. These are dual side of the same thing. You may say that, okay, maybe sometimes firms are lending. That is so true, that household may borrow. This saving is a borrowing from the money market. So number one variable, unlike the consumption function, which number one variable was disposable income and other variables, here the number one variable as described in the books is the interest rate and other variables. So interest rate for the investment, is it positive or negative? If it's increasing, it's going to be decreasing. If it is decreasing, it's going to be increasing. So it's basically negative slope. So if we draw if we have interest rate here and investment here, or opposite, investment here and interest rate here, it's always basically look like this. It's going to be look like this. It's downward sloping, downward slope. The relationship, if the interest rate goes up, investment will go down, because it's becoming more costly for the borrowers to borrow. We could do it for the saving as well, and that is why we said the consumption is a function of disposable income and interest and other things. So interest rate is a very key variable in the macroeconomy. But in this chapter, we are assuming that the interest rate is being given. So we know that the level of investment is going to be a fixed amount according to the equilibrium which is determined in the money market. In money market, we are going to talk about it is in chapter 10. So after chapter 8 and 9, we spent a lot of solid time on explaining what is happening in the money market. So to just simplify, we say that it's the inventory is the stock of goods and firms awaiting for sale. That is an investment. And also machines and equipments which purchased to be used in the so planned investment, those additions to capital stock and inventories that are planned by the firms. So a firm in the beginning of the period before the production takes place, it plans to make some production. So it goes and buys machines and materials and things. Okay, the investment is been decided in advance. Actual investment is when the equilibrium is taken place. So actual amount of investment, the changes in the inventories are settled and it's no longer changing. That is the actual investment. So if a firm is planning to produce, but then suddenly the market is, the demand side for their products is far more than their expectation. So they are going to, whatever they have in the inventory, to sell it out. So the level of expected inventory, the machines and the commodities which they were stored, it's going to go out. So the level of inventory will come down. So we are using the planned investment, the amount of which we are planning ahead, and the actual one where the changes of the inventory will be adjusted so as we can make to serve our customers. So demand and supply is happening. The equilibrium happens at the actual investment. What is being planned, or the functional form of our behavior based on our reservation, based on our expectation about the future, based on the interest rate and so many other factors, we would say that we would plan to buy more inventories if these variables are known. So this is the distinction between planned investment and the actual investment. So if a firm is overestimating, then instead of being selling, it goes and sits in the inventories. So the level of inventories are going up. So this is when the actual production or actual investment is going to be far more than the planned one. And vice versa. So if overestimate how much it will be sell in a period, it will end up being more in the inventory than it planned in the beginning. So the inventory, expected inventory or planned inventory, is a gauge to make distinction between actual and the planned inventory. And the number one variable, as I just said it's the interest rate. Everything else remains the same. If the interest rate change, investment is going to be reflected. So when the interest rate falls, it means that cost of borrowing is less, so they will invest more. They will plan to have more in their inventories so as they can sell better. So the relationship with graph would be like this. We know that the, investment is a function of interest rate, but this is another, because this is like price and this is like quantity, where economists put the independent variable in the vertical axis, interest rate, and the horizontal axis is the dependent variable or plan. So if we know that in the money market the interest rate is 6%, so how much people are going to be investing I1. If it is 3%, it is going to be I0, and if it raised to the 9%, they're reducing to I2, something like this. Okay, so other determinants, the level of income is may be affecting. So the decision of firms on how much to invest depends among many other things. Expectations about the future is helping. If you are optimistic that demand side is going to be very strong, you may basically go and buy a lot of inventories and be prepared for selling. And the optimism and pessimism will encounter that how much machines and equipments and the inventories are going to be piled up. Inventories and machines and equipments are a reflection of our optimism or pessimism. Keynes is calling the relationship between investment and interest rate as the animal spirit. More details of this is explained in I think chapter 15 or 16, but this is showing that people are not only for reflecting with the level of output, they also respond to the level of interest rate. So can we basically make more money if we buy inventories, or we go to the money market and basically lend it to others as such? So this is called animal spirit, but we are not unfolding as such. Further details in the consumption behavior in chapter 15 is explained. Now that we know the consumption, saving, and investment function, we are able to basically say that what would be the equilibrium in the market. And I already told you, and I showed it into the circular flow diagram, that the equilibrium happens once the expenditure side is going to be equal to the y. So we know the functional form of the c. The c was a plus b y, and I, let's say it is at fixed level. So together it forms the aggregate expenditure. At which level of income this is equal? Is it identity? No, it is not identity. This part is identity, but be it equal or unequal to the y is an equation. So you can determine the level of which bring, so the equilibrium condition would be this. And in most other cases, it may be actually y bigger than c plus I. This is disequilibrium. Or y may become smaller than c plus I. In either way, there are internal forces which bring the economy into the equilibrium. So disequilibrium, once aggregate output or aggregate income is bigger than aggregate expenditure or smaller than aggregate expenditure. I told you that there are three ways. Number one is the tabular form or schedule. So the level of output is being given in the column Y, and the aggregate consumption C is being given to us. So this is basically coming from that equation which we had it. C is equal in 100 plus 0.75 Y. So if you have 100, this becomes 175. If you have 200, it becomes 250. If you have 400, if you put 400 here, is exactly becomes, so this consumption and aggregate income is going to be equal. But we also have a fixed amount of investment. So I is equal fixed amount, because interest rate is fixed. So we are assuming that this is exogenous. It's ceteris paribus. Everything else remains the same. Investment is 25. So actually, this is not the equilibrium. This is not the equilibrium. This is just showing that consumption and income are equal. But the equilibrium would be that 2 and 3 together, number 4, 2 and 3 is showing the aggregate expenditure, which 400 plus 25 is 425. So spending is 425, but the income is 400. So they are unequal. But if we continue, we would see that these together is 500 and this is also 500. So Y is equal to aggregate expenditure. If this is equal, then we have equilibrium. So the column 5 is showing that is there equilibrium? Can we take the Y minus aggregate expenditure? Is it equal? We see that here is unequal. Here is negative, negative, 0. Once it's 0, we have equilibrium. So equilibrium is 1. This is equal 0. It means that Y is equal aggregate expenditure. So the equilibrium level is at income equal 500. All expenditure together, C plus I, is going to be exactly equal to this. We can have alternative representation with the graph. So the graph is basically showing that consumption was 100 plus consumption was 100 plus 0.75 Y, right? And investment is this 25 constant. So add them together, this becomes aggregate expenditure. So here we put the aggregate expenditure in terms of dollar and we draw that line, and the slope of this is less than 1. Because the slope of consumption is less than 1, the slope of this is also become 125 plus 0.75 Y. Okay, so this is Y, this is aggregate expenditure, and the relationship is the y-intercept is 125 and the slope is 0.75. So it is not, it's going to be certainly the intersection with the 45-degree line. 45-degree line is everywhere aggregate expenditure, this is called equilibrium condition, is equal to Y, because it's going to be a square. 800, 800, 200, 200, 500, 500. So if it is going on the 45-degree line, the locus of pairs of Y and AE, which they are equal, is being shown by the 45-degree line. So the equilibrium condition is that the intersection of 45-degree line and the aggregate expenditure C plus I, that is giving you exactly that $500. Equation wise, you would basically say that consumption is 100 plus 0.75, investment is 25. Let's add them up together. So add them up together, it's basically 100 plus this plus 25. Is it going to be equal to 5? Is it going to be equal to 5? Actually, up to here, there's a mistake here. I should I should fix it. This up to here, this up to here is consumption, and this is investment. And investment and consumption, at which level of, the only unknown is the y, so we can solve it. So we take this 0.75 to the left, and the sign of course is changing, and this 125 remains on the right side. And there are a lot of mistakes here, I am afraid. This is equal. So this 1 minus 0.25 is 0.75 is 0.25y is equal, total sum of this is 125. So y is going to be 125 divided by 0.25, which is 500. So with the equation we could determine, with the graph we can determine, and with the table we can also determine. So depending on the way that we ask you in the multiple choice question, you could easily find. So this is the way 1, this is the way 2 with the graphs, and this is the way number 3, the use of equation or calculus. And of course this is we assume that you know the basics of calculus, so it is going to be a very simple algebra to be used. Now what if we have saving and investment? If we want to say equilibrium, graphical equilibrium, so I push this a little bit up. In graphical equilibrium, we would say that equilibrium is 45-degree line, 45, and intersection with the aggregate expenditure, which is always equal to C plus I. Okay, and the equilibrium condition is been represented by 45-degree line, which is aggregate expenditure is equal y. So if this is y, this is aggregate expenditure. Of course, the 45-degree line is showing the, I write it here, equilibrium condition. Equilibrium condition, and the equilibrium would be this point E. At which level of income these two are equal? These two are equal. The two more way with equations is equilibrium condition. Number 1 is that we equate y equal AE. Alternatively, equilibrium condition is injections equal leakages. You may say, where is these words are coming? Basically, in the circular flow diagram, again, I brought you back to the circular flow diagram. The main flow, if I want to show it with the black, the main flow is this. Okay, so if something is taken out from this circle, which is going this way, counterclockwise, if something is leaking, like saving is a leakage, tax is another leakage, is leaking. Investment investment and government spending, they are being re-injected. These are injections. So these are injections. The import is a leakage. Export is an injection. Okay? So if considering this, now coming back to our simplified model, which here, what is the leakage? The leakage is only this, so this is a leakage. D leakage here, and the I is going to be the injection only, because there's no government, there's no import export. So the equilibrium condition with this is, what is the injection is the I, what is the leakage is the S. So imagine that we had consumption is equal 100 plus 0.75 Y. What would be the S as the leakage? S, we already did it before. Remember, Y minus this, which was minus 100 plus 0.25 Y. So this is, we determined it before. And what is the investment? Investment, we assume that this is fixed amount to 25. So alternative way, we could use C plus I and and determine the Y level. Here we are equating leakage and investment. So injection is 25 and the leakage is minus 100 plus 0.25 Y. Now again we can solve this. So in this situation, I keep this in the left and I bring this to the left. So it's become 125 equal 0.25 Y. Okay. So now the Y is going to be 125 divided by 0.25, which is exactly 500. So we have either graphical equilibrium intersection of 45-degree line with the aggregate expenditure, equational, this is equational, number one equilibrium condition. Another alternative is the injection and leakages. And this is also been explained in the book, that equilibrium is S equal I. So this is actually coming from that identity. From this identity, if we can replace the Y with C plus I, then C is going to be omitted, and this is saving is a leakage, and investment is an injections. So you can use this as an equilibrium condition. It will be only equal if saving is equal investment. We can show this equilibrium with an alternative graphic. So we noted that investment is constant and is 25, and saving starts from minus 100 y-intercept and positively slope but less than 1, and the slope of this is 0.25, and they're gonna intersect each other exactly at the level of 500 income. So you can say that the moment that the investment and saving functions are intersecting, that is the equilibrium level of income, which in this case is 500. So allow me to stop it here, and then I will explain the adjustment and multiplier analysis. So if everything else remains the same, the determination of equilibrium or equilibrium level of income is going to be with various ways we can determine it, depending on the way that the information is being given to you in the question. But is it going to be always the equilibrium level? No, it is not, because if other factors change, then equilibrium level of income is going to be changing. So we are going to next talk about that, and that this is called multiplier analysis. Thank you.